Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're totally stripping away the pretension and breaking down how to, well, actually get smarter. And we're going to do this by sticking to one absolutely crucial rule. We are going to explain it in simple language. No fluff, no overly complex, mind-bending philosophical jargon. We're just going to look at straightforward, actionable steps pulled right from our source material. So, you ready? Let's dive right in. Society loves to insist that you need 12 years of school plus 4 years of college and then maybe 6 years of grad school to finally become quote-unquote smart. But as our source playfully points out, usually that grand 22-year plan just leaves you completely broke. Sure, you might be able to write a flawless, perfectly punctuated English post on Reddit complaining about not being able to find a job, but is that really the kind of smart we're going for here? Yeah, probably not. So, if you're trying to avoid spending 2 literal decades in a classroom, you've probably poked around online for some guidance. And the second you do, boom, you are hit with this avalanche of vague lifestyle brain hacks. You definitely know the ones I'm talking about. Eat more blueberries, chug a bunch of black coffee, sleep a full 8 hours. And look, while those things sound really nice, they don't actually teach you anything. They're basically just the equivalent of a Facebook post copied and pasted from some random WikiHow article. To actually get smart, at some point you just have to roll up your sleeves, do the work, and learn stuff. Which brings us to Section 1, the reading rulebook. If you want actionable advice, you've got to read. But honestly, not all reading is created equal. Fiction is absolutely fantastic for speeding up your reading pace, building up a stronger vocabulary, and, well, honestly, if you read enough dialogue, it kind of makes you feel like you have friends. But if your actual goal is to casually drop a really interesting knowledge into conversations and sound genuinely informed, nonfiction is your golden ticket. It is the absolute key to holding your own and earning respect without coming off like a massive know-it-all. Now, sharing those nonfiction facts is a pretty delicate art. Let's say you just finished reading a history book and you're chatting about human evolution. If someone goes, "Man, it's crazy how we evolved from chimpanzees," and you instantly jump in with, "Well, actually, evolution is nonlinear," you are instantly unlikable. Like, maybe that flies in a YouTube comment section, but in real life, it's just obnoxious. Instead, try the humble approach. Start with something like, "It is crazy, right? I was actually just reading the other day." See the difference? Agreeing first makes you sound grounded. You're teaching people without making them feel dumb, which ironically makes them see you as smarter and way more respectable. And finding these books is incredibly easy, especially since we're keeping things simple today. You really don't need a curated top 100 list from a fancy magazine. Just Google the exact topic you want to learn about, like, I don't know, books about cleaning. And our source notes, with a bit of a wink that maybe, just maybe, your finger slips while you're browsing online, you click a weird link, and whoops, you accidentally download a free ebook viewer and a free file. Stuff happens. However you get your hands on it, once you have the book, you can start mining it for those great conversational tidbits and useful skills. That takes us right into Section 2, the 80-20 action plan. You see, getting smart isn't about memorizing an entire book word for word. It actually relies on this wonderfully forgiving mathematical rule. You really only need to acquire 20% of the knowledge on any given subject to successfully master 80% of the actual skill. So, good news, you don't need a PhD in a topic to be highly functional and super impressive at it. You just need the core fundamentals to get the ball rolling. This rapid early progress is what we call the learning curve. Just by practicing a little bit right at the beginning, you make a massive amount of progress super quickly. It's like a rocket taking off. But, and this is a big but, this beautiful, steep curve comes with a major, unavoidable catch. And here is the brutal truth about how our brains actually work. Step 1, you absolutely have to practice the skill. Step 2, if you don't immediately use what you just read, your brain essentially says, well, this is completely useless, and permanently deletes it to save space. It's literally a use it or lose it situation. Reading alone doesn't make you smart, not unless you give your brain a concrete physical reason to hang on to the material. I absolutely love this quote from the source because it just hits the nail on the head in the most relatable way possible. No one ever learned how to tie a tie by watching how to tie a tie, right? You only learn it by watching a video while physically looping that piece of fabric around your own neck over and over. The exact same rule applies to literally whatever you're reading. If you read a chapter on how to clean a bedroom efficiently, you have to go clean a bedroom right then and there. It doesn't even have to be your bedroom, just clean one. Doing that is what actually tells your brain to lock that knowledge in forever. Moving on to Section 3, tricking your brain to learn. So what happens when you read about a skill you can't practice right away? Like, say, jump starting a dead car battery. Unless you happen to have two cars parked in your living room just waiting to be tested, you're going to need what the source calls the imagination hack. If you just stare at a diagram in a book and try to passively memorize it, I guarantee you will completely freeze up when your car actually dies in the rain. Instead, you've got to trick your brain. Put yourself in that exact high-stress situation mentally. Pretend it's your car. Vividly imagine the stressful moment from start to finish while you watch a tutorial. By simulating the whole experience in your head, you convince your brain that the information is actively being used, and it'll store it safely away for when you actually need it.
Interestingly enough, this imagination hack is basically the entire foundation of the school system. Think about it. You learn a piece of information, but because you probably aren't going to use it in real life for another 15 years, the teacher creates an artificial, imaginary situation where that information suddenly becomes incredibly vital. And that situation is called a test. If you get it wrong, you fail. Those artificial stakes force your brain to at least attempt to remember the data.
But, as we all painfully know, there is a glaring flaw in this system. The very second the exam is over, those imaginary stakes completely disappear. Your brain registers that the threat is gone, says, okay, well, this isn't useful anymore, and promptly dumps all that carefully memorized data right into the trash. Because of this massive flaw, people try to overcompensate by looking up highly complex internet study strategies. They'll tell you to use spaced repetitions, study in precisely timed intervals, or draw these crazy, elaborate mind maps. But remember our golden rule: explain it in simple language and keep things efficient. You should really just skip all of that. To truly retain what you learn, your focus should be entirely on doing practice questions. Why? Simply because practice questions inherently simulate reality. They constantly create those little micro situations where you're forced to use the knowledge immediately. Now, what if you're reading something that doesn't come with practice questions? Well, then you just make up your own ridiculous high-stakes scenarios. The source offers this beautifully absurd example. Pretend you're hanging off a cliff by one arm, and someone will only pull you up if you can correctly name all the parts of a human cell. I know, it sounds completely silly, but forcefully convincing your brain that the stakes are life or death is the ultimate key to capturing your attention and actually locking in that memory. And that leads us to our final section, Section 4, the power of textbooks. Because active simulation is the secret sauce to retention, we finally arrive at the absolute best tool out there. This comparison is the reality check we probably all need right now. Think about it. YouTube videos on complex subjects. They're super fun. They're incredibly easy to just sit back and passively watch. But the result? They are almost completely forgotten an hour later. Textbooks, on the other hand, are an absolute S-tier format. The experience is no fluff, zero distractions, just pure distilled information. And the best part? They have massive amounts of built-in practice questions that literally force you to engage with the material directly. And let me tell you, textbooks are not for the casual learner, mostly because they absolutely refuse to hold your hand. If you get stuck on one of those built-in practice questions, you don't get a helpful little pop-up animation to save you. Nope. You have to physically dig through the appendix, flipping all the way back to page 37 in Roman numerals just to find the answer yourself. But here's the thing. That friction, that real effort, that is exactly what makes the learning stick in your brain permanently. So, the absolutely crucial takeaway from all of this is right here. Now that you understand these simple, totally unglamorous mechanics of how the human brain actually learns, you're left with a choice. Are you going to keep scrolling online, endlessly looking for a magic shortcut, a fancy new study interval, or some miracle brand of blueberries? Or are you going to go accidentally download a textbook, imagine those high stakes, and finally get to work? The path to actually getting smart is right there in front of you. You just have to take it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.